All right, YouTube. The date is June 16th, 2019. The project is this emergency brake assembly off a Ford ZF transmission. It's actually called a Ford ZF emergency brake. It's, I think, years 88 through 96, 98, maybe even into 2000s. It's a very common unit. It bolts on the back of the transmission where the drive shaft mounts up. You can see this is basically the drum for the e-brake shoes. It's already off. That's where your drive shaft comes on. I'm in this project about 3 weeks now. This has been a nightmare. I am not one to use bearing pullers or any of this stuff. So it was a big investment in tools, but I just got into it to such a deep extent that I just had to finish it and I had to keep buying tools. So there's not a lot of info out there on how this thing comes apart. I figured it out. Fortunately, I didn't damage anything. So I figured I'd share what I came up with here. So if you look at this thing, this is already apart. I just put this puller in a position where to display like basically the first step after you get this thing off the back of the transmission. I got a socket down in there. This puller really isn't big enough. You should probably get a bigger puller. But it does the job. So basically you got to push this inner assembly out the center. You could do this with a press. If you were to set up blocks right here and put it in a press somehow, and then use some kind of round cylinder to push on this point right here, you could also use that technique to push that out. But that's the first step in disassembling. I'm gonna pause the video here, reset up some parts, and then take it from there. Okay, so like I said, this was already apart. I just had to yank it off of there. And then, so when you take the drum off, you're gonna be staring at this at the back of the transmission, and you see the shoes right there, and you say, well, why do I need to tear this whole thing down just to replace the shoes? They're right there. Well, by taking these bolts out, it really doesn't do anything for you when it's still up there, or even when the whole thing is down, because this unit needs to be pressed out. And you can see you have a bearing on this side. You're going to have a bearing on the top side facing the opposite direction. And you can see in there you got races on the top and bottom, just like a typical trailer bearing or wheel bearing. So it has to be pulled or pressed out, no matter, there's no two ways about it. If you look at the Ford procedure, it confirms that, and you just got to live with it. That's what has to be done. So once you get it to this point, you can take these bolts out. This whole assembly comes off, and then you can redo the shoes and you can put everything back in. The races need to be pressed out. The races were very easy to do. You can see the race way down in there, and then the race closer right there. You need a brass punch for that, and then they came right in and out. It was very easy. This here is another story. This piece right here, this comes off easy enough. Get that out of the way to avoid damaging that for your speedometer. You have a seal down here at the bottom, which is, you can't get on and off. You're going to destroy the seal when you press this out. So doing new seals is the first thing. So you got to pull your old bearing off. If you look down in there, I don't know, you might want to look up a video on how to pull a bearing off with a kit like this. I had to buy this kit. This large puller was barely enough to get around it. It wasn't enough. I had to buy longer bolts. That was okay. That worked as is. So if you find a puller set like that and you want to change out the bolts, or just get a larger bearing puller. So you're going to have to pull this bearing on and off a couple of times. And if you clamp that puller on there in this groove right here where you're pulling on the race and not on the bearing itself, you can pull this bearing on and off the shaft without destroying the new one. So the reason you're gonna have to take this apart several times, and it really sucks, and that's why I'm at like week 3 screwing around with this thing. So the next very important thing to talk about is this shim here. This is a shim to set the spacing and the end play on the bearings. There's not a lot of info out there, but Allstate Gear is pretty much the only place that sells the kit for this, and they do sell a shim kit. So the shim kit looks like this. This is actually 2 shim kits. Each shim kit is $30. It comes with 2 spacers this size. If you measure them with the caliper, you'll get the exact size. 2 shims a little bit thicker, and then 3 that are, these are 5/1000ths each. So when you assemble this whole thing back together, you're looking for, picture like trailer bearings. You go, hand tight and a quarter turn loose, just to give yourself a little bit of play in the bearings. You're looking for something similar, but when you torque this down, the Ford spec on this upper nut is 215 foot-pounds. So you can't do like a quarter turn loose and then call it a day like you can with trailer bearings, and that's why this is so important. So when you get your new bearings, you need to go through taking this apart, torquing it. You need to look at the Ford spec. It's the Ford procedure. It's very elaborate on how to retorque this and get the end plate just right. I'll post a copy of what the document I found, but the Ford spec is 2 to 4/1000ths of end play. I'm going to pause this for a second. I'm going to show you how to measure that end play. Okay, I got reset up here. I just quickly assembled this. There's no bearings in there or anything. I just did it for just to display what's going on here. So you need a dial indicator. You need to set it up something like this. Let's pretend we put the new races in, press the new bearing on the shaft, put one of these spacers in. Let's say you start with your original. Just see what you got. Is it too light, too tight? Is it too loose? And then you're going to assemble it, and you're going to this is the other tool I had to make. It is a 2 9/16 socket. When I bought this socket, it was advertised for rounded corners. The nut itself would not fit in there because it had square corners. So I had to cut the corners out, and I had to cut a bunch of flat bar, and I had to weld this thing all out. The only torque wrench I had was Relative's torque wrench that went to 1,000 foot-pounds, and it was 1-inch drive, so I had to make an adapter to make this 1-inch drive. This was probably at least half a day to make this friggin' thing, which is another reason why this job is lingering into 3 weeks. Okay, so you're going to need something like that, and you're going to need a torque wrench that goes to 215 foot-pounds. Just checking your end play. You're probably not going to torque it to the full 215. I would torque it to 80 or something just to get it tight, and then what you're measuring for is up and down motion. So you're going to grab this with 2 hands, and you're going to pull it up and down. And if you have, so right there, there's no bearing in here. This is a terrible example, but say you had 20 or 30 thousandths of play, then you're way too far out. Ford wants between 2 and 4 thousandths, and you'll see that if you look at the procedure. So at this point, like I put 2 spacers in there, and I had about 33 thousandths. It looked a lot like that. So you take the thing apart, you figure out what your next step is with the shims. Now the problem with the shims is they don't give you, I'm in a case where I need something like 110 thousandths worth of shims. But with the combinations that I have here, even if I stack up all 6 of these, so this is $60 in shims here, even if I stack up all 6 of these 5/1000 shims and then use the thickest one I have, I'm still basically crushing the bearings right in there. There is no play whatsoever. So I'm dealing with that. I'm actually sanding one down very, very carefully. I don't know if I recommend that. I don't know how that's going to go. You probably want to find Allstate Gear doesn't. They claim that Ford sells these shims in like 5 to 10 thousandths increments, but Allstate Gear only sells a kit where you get these big thick ones, and then you get 3 of these little ones, but it's not what you need. So you need to figure out what you need and call them, and you're definitely gonna be screwing around with this thing for a couple of weeks, because this is critically important. All right, let me pause it again and we'll reset and then wrap this up. Okay, back to this view. Now, with all of the, you see those shims, I'll just point out again, this is where those shims go. You might put two of the thick ones on there, one at 70 thousandths, one at 90 thousandths. You might stack up a few of the 5 thousandths ones to get whatever you need. Hopefully you have what you need on the first shot. I did not. But every time, you will see in the Ford procedure, every time you take this apart, you're going to need to use your 3-jaw puller to pull it apart. Every time you do that, your seal is going to get pressed in and out of the bottom of the assembly right there, which I guess would be on that side. There's no way to see or be careful about it or do anything about it. This seal is going to get ripped in and out several times, and my seal got destroyed on probably the 3rd attempt. Ford says in the procedure, basically rinse and repeat until you get your clearance right. But what happens when the seal gets destroyed? So this is already the, I did pull this bearing off the shaft once before. I put it back on, I put the seal on, this seal got destroyed. I had to wait another several days to get a new seal. So what I'm doing is, this seal is destroyed right now. The spring has been stretched out and it's junk. So I'm doing my spacing, my shims, on and off until I get everything just right with this crappy seal in place. Then, once I know I got this perfect, I'm going to put my shims aside. I'm going to write down exactly how I'm going to reassemble. Then I'm going to pull this bearing off from the bottom lip. If you get your puller right in there, you're pulling on the race and not on the bearing itself. You can take the bearing off, then I can take the crap seal off, and then I can put the new seal on, and then the final assembly, after everything is done, then this seal will only be pushed in once. So with that said, when you tackle yours, if I were to do this over again, I would assemble this whole thing. I would tap this bearing on without a seal on it at all, and then I would just make plans to pull it off again and put the seal back on before final assembly. And that's really the only way you're going to do this without screwing up seals for no reason, because you're not going to get it. You're not going to get this together in one shot. Another big thing on this, and I screwed up. They're very clear in the procedure that this housing is balanced because this spins with the drive shaft. Basically, you got 4 bolt holes, and then down here you got 4 bolts. These are not in a perfect square. So they only go in 2 ways. So I got my marks set there. So I got my clock position on that. This I had marked. I think you see the gray, the silver streak markings there. But when I cleaned this up with brake cleaner and acetone, it washed off my markings. I'm pretty sure this was the one, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to have to mount the thing. I'm going to have to, spin it up to 55 miles an hour, see if there's any vibration. But what I really need to do at this point is take it to a drive shaft shop and have them make sure it's in balance. But I'm probably just going to put it on and see if I have any problems. The good news is this piece itself, since I already have this marked, this can come off very easily once it's back on the vehicle, and then I can just turn it around 180 degrees, put it back on, and I should be fine. So that's gonna be how I go with that. So keep in mind, mark all your stuff, put a little groove in the end of the bolt or something, because once you lose track of this, you're screwed. I guess that's about it here. Again, I'm going on 3 weeks. This is ridiculous. I mean, to make a tool like this, 1-inch drive, nobody doing homeowner auto repair is going to have a 1-inch drive or anything that's going to go to 215 foot-pounds. And that's what Ford specs out for the nut on the end of this thing. So even to just get it to 215 foot-pounds, I had to build this block. I put 45-degree grooves in it so it holds that in place. And then I had a plate of steel, a welder and fabricator, so I was able to whip this out in a few hours. Angle welded to the plate in 3 different locations. Then I got clamps holding it to the bench, And when I torque this thing to like 100, 150, this plate moves. I'm going to have to drill holes and bolt this thing to the bench and hope I don't pull a whole bench over trying to torque this to 215. But that is the Ford spec. And that's what you got to do. If you're going to take this on, you have to do all these things, and you have to really commit to this whole job. One more pause here, and I'm going to come back with one more thing. Okay, so I just wanted to show these nuts quick. When you buy the kit from Allstate Gear or wherever you get it from, it's going to have your brake shoes, it's going to have your springs, it's going to have a gasket that goes between the bottom of that thing and your transmission. And it has the bearings and the races and the seals and all that stuff. So you think you're getting this kit. The kit costs 150 bucks. You think you're done, but it doesn't come with a new nut. These nuts, you can see that punch mark right there. You'll see when you get yours off that it's a punch mark. It's like a lock washer, and it locks it in on that little divot in there. So when you reassemble, you're going to torque to 215, and you're going to need a new nut. It's a one-time use part, and then you knock a chunk of that in there to lock it in place. So that nut is $30. And you need that. It doesn't come with the kit. These spacers for a set of one, which is 6 spacers, is $30, and I needed a second set, so I'm at $60 in spacers, and I'm at $30 for the nut, and then $150 for the kit. And then I had to buy tools for this. You know, I don't mind investing in tools. Hopefully I use them again, but you're going to be in a few $100, and I really don't have confidence that your average shop is going to be able to take this job on without these stumbling blocks that I've run into. So you got to decide if you even want to do this. I mean, I really needed an emergency brake on this rig, but it's very discouraging. So there wasn't anything out there on this, and I thought it was very important to show how this comes apart and what you're going to have to do. But I think a garage would charge easily $500 for this job. So think about that before you take it on. Hope this helps somebody, and thanks for watching.